News, folks, has been found on the ground of the Smithsonian Museum here in D.C. This is the second time this week. Yesterday, a noose was found in a public gallery of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. It was discovered by museum visitors in an exhibition on segregation. The museum was closed until U.S. Park Police investigated and removed it, and the gallery was reopened within 3 hours. This is the same museum opened in an emotional ceremony by President Barack Obama in September after years of fundraising and lobbying by museum staff and supporters, including the founding director, Lonnie Bunch. Folks, in a statement, Bunch said this: "The news has long represented a deplorable act of cowardice and depravity, a symbol of extreme violence for African Americans. Today's incident is a painful reminder of the challenges that African Americans continue to face." In an email sent to Smithsonian staff, the institution secretary David Scorton said, quote, "The Smithsonian family stands together in condemning this act of hatred and intolerance, especially repugnant in a museum that affirms and celebrates the American values of inclusion and diversity." The disturbing incident comes less than a week after a noose was found hanging from a tree outside the Smithsonian's Hirshhorn Museum, which houses art collections. Nooses have been showing up around the country, from the 4 found at a construction site in Maryland to North Carolina's Duke University campus, a frat house at the University of Maryland, and a high school in Lakewood, California. Congressman John Lewis of Georgia says he was saddened that someone would do such a heinous act at the museum.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that at this time that someone would put a symbol of the dark past at this unbelievable institution that was built by the people of America and by people around the world to tell the story, the struggle, and the history of African American from the days of slavery to the present.
And so we want to certainly thank hashtag IMGWoods for actually posting that video, joining us today on our panel. We are joined by, to my far left, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, economist, president emerita, host of It's Personal with Dr. J podcast, Dr. Cleo Monago, behavioral and cultural analyst, plus Angela Saylor, deputy to the chairman, the Gloucester Institute. Folks, look, the reality is we know exactly what the news stands for. And we are operating now in a climate where white supremacists have been emboldened. Many of them say they've been emboldened by comments and language from President Donald Trump. We saw the incident in Portland. We've seen other incidents as well. I mean, you have folks now who have no problem being public with their racism and bigotry.
Exactly. And for this to happen at this museum is heartbreaking on one hand, but on the other hand, it's empowering for us because it reminds us there are some deluded people who have melanin in their skin who think we're post-racial. No, we are not post-racial one bit. And so these deluded people have to look at this. And again, as you say, Roland, we know what the news stands for, but for those folks who don't read it, this is a symbol of intimidation. And we have been seeing nooses in the modern times, unfortunately. In 2010, the EEOC had actually more than 20 cases in front of them that had nooses involved in them. Now, 20 cases may not sound like a lot, but it was an unprecedented number. The EEOC, footnote, is an organization that 45 would like to eliminate, cut their budget, put them under, they cut their budget to do a number of other things. So while we have a president who's cutting the civil rights organizations in every government department, from the Department of Education to the Department of Justice, we have this reminder that is all the more necessary now with that person in the White House to basically guard against the erosion of our civil rights.
But you know, the black struggle narrative, which includes obviously having to deal with nooses and lynching, is not a narrative that has been talked about enough for the millennials to have a functional relationship with that phenomena. They don't have the visceral reaction to the noose that many of us have because we don't have a continuing narrative that talks about it enough. So I'm not sure they have the same kind of reaction to it that we have. I know that so-called hate crimes have been happening since before Trump. There were a lot of them that raised because we had a black president. We had a number of them growing in this country, including using the noose. But my concern, which I'm going to talk about a lot, is our paralysis. We are in the midst of this horror, And overall, we're pretty laid back, which is why I started off my comments with the fact that the millennials do not have this relationship to the noose where they're appalled. They're like, oh, it's a noose.
It's interesting, Angela. I had a lunch yesterday. I was in New York doing media for State of Black America Town Hall, and I had lunch yesterday with Harry Belafonte. It was a great conversation. And one of the things that he said, and he questioned as to whether or not we still have what he called the rebel in our hearts. Do we still have? Are we still operating with the moral clarity in terms of leading this country? He said black folks always have operated with that moral clarity, and what we are seeing. And again, I've been studying what is taking place, and it's quite interesting to me how, to some degree, Black Lives Matter and other groups have been quiet. Not saying that all folks have been quiet, but it's interesting that you have not seen this sort of clarion call that is vocal, that is persistent to what has been happening.
Well, you know, as I look at the narrative here, and I'm looking at American University and the Noose incident there and the high school in Maryland, where we are in danger of a threat of something like this being called a prank and being excused. I think it's very important how we respond to this. I think it's very important, to your point, our response will help the younger generation to understand how our communication and our actions about this will impact the meaning of it and how they respond to it in the future as our future voices. And as you're saying, yeah, we've got to come with a lot of unction when things are wrong, and we've got to do it with a lot of courage and be bold, because hate is hate.
And we also can't be lulled into a sense of complacency in this thinking that well, millennials today are different from previous generations. Because when you look at the various studies, their views on, well, they believe that discrimination against whites is just as potent as it is as African Americans. You're going, okay, what world are y'all operating in? And so, I mean, I can go down the line there. I do believe we sort of have this sort of, okay, fine, but you know, look, we listen to hip hop, so do they. We all get along. No, we still are dealing with the granddaughters and the grandsons of Jim Crow.
Well, Roland, when you look at the lynching of Richard Collins III in Maryland, the young brother who would have graduated from Bowie State University had not some deranged white boy just stabbed him while he was waiting for his Uber. You look at that and you have to ask a question. Who raised that little white boy? I mean, who was his mama? Who was his daddy? What did they say or sitting around the dinner table? I shudder because his mother actually is she works at the University of Maryland. So you wonder what she was saying to her son that made him feel like he had to come to school packing with a knife and that it was okay to lynch this young black man. What's interesting therein, while Paul Ryan called for a moment of silence for Manchester victims, you have not seen anybody call for a moment of silence for this young man who's going into the Army, who already had his commission.
First of all, it took 3 days for Donald Trump to say anything. You have not heard significant outcry. Not only that, first of all, he said nothing about that particular case.
That's what he hasn't opened.
3 days about Portland. Angela, you have Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who virtually says nothing about these incidents. This is where leadership matters. And silence, to me, speaks volumes just as...
But isn't this what we expect? I mean, it's what I fully expect from the Trump administration and everybody he hired, who a lot of them were white supremacists. This is a cliche and it's to be expected. But I want to get back to something you mentioned about Black Lives Matters in terms of what we're looking at now. Black Lives Matters was propelled by video. It was propelled by shocking video of murders that we can see.
Right.
There's no video.
And literally, I talked to a prominent Black Lives Matter activist yesterday who said the exact same thing.
Because it's the truth.
So, okay, then we can't get a video of the Noose?
The point is that, like I said earlier in my comments, we're in paralysis. I call it a trance, which you've heard me say before on this show. We're in a trance until something blatant and blaring, like a video, throws a wrench at us. Then our egos get messed up and say, I'm not going out like that. And then we start getting beating our chest. But there's not a black human rights and a black defense campaign in this country.
But you know what? You know what's real interesting to me is the movie Get Out. I took my children to see the movie Get Out, and the riveting effect that it had on them, when I compare it to having them watch Roots, was astoundingly different. And since you haven't seen the movie, I can't, but the riveting effect.
I heard about it.
Yeah, the riveting effect that it had. And it was the video, it was the imagery of being in a sunken place that just scared the bejeebies out of them, in terms of them waking up from, kind of growing up where...
What's the film about? Is it about a black man with a white woman and things go from there, or is it more to it?
It's way more to it.
It's way more to it, Cleo.
And it's
Cleo, go see the movie. But I want to pick up on that because here's something that also jumps out at me, because it also goes beyond just in terms of the incidents. You're also seeing virtual silence from mainstream media. Again, not shining a light on these stories, and the point that I keep explaining to people, that media has gotten whiter. In terms of the executives, in terms of the on-air folks, you might see a few contributors sprinkle in here and there, but the level of focus on these issues has also changed. And I think, to your point, even for media, if you don't have the video, that's really what's compelling. Not the issue,
the video,
not the problem. It's if we don't have that, well then it's not really a story.
But again, Roland, I think that you're right about the media being wider, because some of the producers, et cetera, and others who might take this and do something with it, but the image of going from Emmett Till's casket to a noose, that's video.
Right.
To go from Emmett Till's casket to a noose and talk about what has happened, and to combine that with what Mayor Landrieu did in New Orleans in his amazing speech, where he talked about you don't have any monuments to lynching. You don't have any monuments to what happened to black people. You just have these monuments to these civil war generals. Right. And so you combine that, it could be a powerful story. You're going to do it, right?
Well, we do it all the time.
I know, but I mean, I'm talking about that particular visual video.
We do it all the time.
A peaceful protest turned deadly. 37-year-old black man was shot and killed by Baton Rouge police. His hands are in the air, and you still get shot by the cops.
Oh my God, please don't tell me he's dead.
We're not gonna let hate define us.
Race is a big part of this.
If truly all lives matter, then all lives need to matter equally. What we require is action. What we require is accountability. We understand that black lives do matter, and we will keep focused on this issue.
NewsOne Now, every weekday morning at 7 on TV1.